Very Basic Soldering. Here are some of the main tools you'll need for some simple soldering, shown in the picture here. First of all, safety glasses. Always wear the safety glasses. Solder can spatter a little bit and get into your eyes. Side cutters will help you cut the wires. A pair of scissors would do the same, but it's also great for cutting the electrical tape. Electrical tape we're going to use for covering up our solder joints. Helping hands are exactly what they sound like. The soldering iron, the solder itself that we're going to use to melt into the joints we want to connect. And this tip tinner is really nice for getting your soldering iron ready. So I've got a couple wires stripped. I'm going to put on my safety glasses here. I've got these stripped wires, and I'm going to show you first how I'm going to solder just a couple of wires together. So I'm going to pull them out of the helping hands. And I've got pretty long stripped ends on those. What I want to do is hold them together with one hand and use my other hand to twist those wires together. I want to get as tight of a twist as I can to try to get the wires to just kind of hang on to each other a little bit. I call this a pigtail connection. Once I have that, I'll put them back in the helping hands and spread them apart a little bit just so there's a bit of tension on that wire. Here's my soldering iron all heated up. I'm going to first clean it off on the damp sponge, but then I'm going to use this tip tinner. Tip tinner gets my iron ready, so you can see that it sizzles a little bit when I dip it into there, but the tip of the iron is getting kind of that shiny silvery look to it. That's a really good thing. That allows for the solder, when you touch it to the iron, it's going to stick to the iron really well. It's not just going to beat up and fall off. Now the smoke. The smoke is rising toward us. This is lead-free solder, which is not nearly as dangerous as solder used to be with all the lead. But smoke is smoke. Best advice is usually don't breathe in any kind of smoke. So we're going to get ready to solder this. I'm going to bring the soldering iron close to the wires. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to heat up the wires, and then I'm going to bring the solder to the heated wires. If they're hot enough, the solder will melt right into the wires. I shouldn't have to touch the tip of the iron with the solder. Sometimes I do a little bit of cheating just to get it started, but those wires are heated up pretty well. Once that solder starts to melt, you'll see it just kind of suck right into those wires just like that. And now you've got a really good connection between the wires. And that'll really help transfer electricity from wire to wire. When I'm done with that, I can remove them from the helping hands. And I've got a pretty long connection there, and I don't really need all of that. Not that it hurts, but it's just, you know, more slag to manage. So you can use your side cutters and cut, you know, 1/2 to 3/4 of that off. Just make sure you don't cut further than you've soldered, or you basically ruin your work there. This is electrical tape. I like to take a small piece of electrical tape, cut it off, and then wrap it around that solder joint. People who are pretty diligent and do a really thorough job have heat shrink tubing that they use. For our purposes, the electrical tape works fine. What we do is we cover up that solder joint. If that solder joint hits another connection that is open, it can cause a short circuit. Your circuit won't work very well. Plus, it can heat up if there's a short circuit. So we don't want that happening. Another big piece that we do a lot is soldering switches. This is a switch. These metal pieces are the terminals of the switch. We're going to be sticking the wire into those holes and then soldering it together there. So when we're clicking that switch, we're either opening or closing a gap. When it's closed, electricity flows. When it's open, the electricity doesn't flow and things are turned off. So I have another couple wires stripped kind of long. I'm going to put one through the hole and kind of bend it around that switch terminal. And I'm going to take the other one and do the same. I like to do both. I try to get these tight. They're not super tight. I don't twist them often because the terminals could possibly break off. These are pretty sturdy terminals though. I do both of them so that I can stick both wires into the clamps of the helping hands, because that helps me hold that switch in place. It's really hard to solder a switch when it's not held in place for you by the helping hands. So what I'm going to do here, again, check the tip of the iron. But I'm going to get that soldering iron right down into that terminal and even kind of stick it through the hole there so that I'm heating up both the wire and the switch terminal. I'm going to get it nice and hot and stick the solder in there so that it starts. Here I'm cheating a little bit by touching it to the iron, but once that happens, you'll see it just kind of suck right down right there. It sucks right down into the switch terminal. Do the same on the other side. You'll see I'm heating up the wire and the terminal, and that's just going to pull the solder right into the heated elements right there. You can see how it just kind of pulls it in. Surprisingly, this cools off pretty well, so I can take it right, or pretty quickly. So I can take these right out of the clips and get to work with it. What's important is the wire does not touch across the terminals. There has to be a gap in there. Here I'm just cutting off some of the excess wire that was folded around the terminals. You don't need any more than you need, but it's most important just to keep that gap clear. So remember, always wear the safety glasses while you're soldering. No questions asked. Always saddle your iron. Put it back in the iron holder. Don't hand it to somebody else with it in your hand. A tinned tip always works better. It transfers the heat. Tape all the solder to connections to prevent any shorts. Don't inhale the smoke. Never inhale smoke. And most of all, have fun. Soldering is a great skill to master.